Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Haswell, and I am the National Pensions Official. I also have a colleague in Birmingham, Chris Mason, who some of you might have come across before, because I think he's visited the branch. So I'm, as for my role in UCU, I negotiate on both USS and to a lesser extent on TPS. And we are facing challenging times with USS at the moment. Now, what's happened is that the pension valuation has been done for the date of 31st of March 2020. Now, thinking back to just over a year ago, it was a very difficult time financially for the markets. So it has been a bit of a double whammy in that the scheme has generally been seen to get more expensive, but particularly using that day as a valuation date. And it's not, there's only 3 dates ever used. So all the schemes in the country either use that one or July or I think it's December. So it's not like you can just pick April 2 or something. So for a lot of the schemes, this hasn't been too bad because of the way they value past service liabilities. But the way USS values past service liabilities, because it's linked to interest rates, that has made it worse. So the scheme now looks terribly, terribly expensive. And they have said to the employer, you have got to pony up a lot more money, a lot more commitment to the scheme, and reduce benefits and do all sorts of terrible things. The employers, unlike in the past, are also unhappy, as we are at UCU, at the way the scheme has been valued. If you remember back in 2018, we had all this before, and we ended up with the joint expert panel. And that worked really hard and came up with a lot of ideas that they and a lot of proposals they gave to USS, and very little has been taken on board, which is a real shame because there was so much put into it, so much work done, so much common sense came out from both, and they were unanimous, and that was with employer and employee representatives. But the scheme has said, oh, we can't afford to do that, it's too risky, and this sort of thing. You've got to bear in mind that the USS scheme is the largest private sector scheme with assets under management in Britain. And it's the 42nd largest in the world. So when you put it in that perspective, you realize it does have to be valued by prudence, prudently. But there is still, we believe, overly cautious assumptions made. And not only do our actuaries challenge that, but so do the employers' actuaries, Aon, our actuaries at First Actuarial. Now, the UK, that's the employer body, has asked employers, in all the big ones, but including employers like yourself, where USS is a minority scheme, to survey their members and ask them about the pensions they want. Now, we believe that that is quite a biased survey. Not all employers are using the same one. So UK have sent out one, but a lot of employers have adapted it. But generally, it's along the same lines. And what I'm here today to do is just to talk to you about what sort of things they're asking you, and tell you what we want to put forward instead, rather than just saying no, we don't want any change. We don't want any change. But living in a world of negotiation and so on, and we are regularly negotiating. We do want to maintain. Everybody wants to maintain a good pension scheme. The TPS is a good scheme, local government's a good scheme, USS is a good scheme. And we want, you know, it's really important that members have confidence in their pensions and know that whatever they're paying in now, they will get out at the end as a regular income for life. So the employer body has started this consultation, which is going to go on until the end of May, 24th of May. And they want employers to pledge a lot of financial support to the scheme. I'm not sure how that's going to work in post-92. So I think it's less important in a way to your employers because there's only a small number of you. But generally, there is what's more concerning for us is the proposals to cut benefits. And they are to reduce the accrual, and that is the build-up of pension, because at the moment in the career average scheme, very similar to the teachers, you are building up 1/75 of your pension plus inflation each year that you are building up pension. So at the end, you get a pot of all those 75ths and all that inflation. And that pot isn't like a defined contribution pot. That pot is replenished every year. So that's your annual pension. You get paid out monthly. And then the next year you'll get the same amount again, plus inflation. So you get where I'm going here. Inflation is one of the major costs of the scheme, and we'll come back to that. Now, one of the UUK's proposals is to reduce that 1/75 build up to 1/85, and that is a lot slower build up of pension, and it could mean that you have to work a bit longer than you would want to. Now, remember, in contrast, although you do get a lump sum of 3 times that amount, I must say, automatic lump sum, whereas in the teachers, you're building up 1/57, but there's no automatic lump sum on the career average. So at the moment, the teachers has probably got a bit of an edge, but in reality, they're both good schemes. The other thing they want to do in the USS scheme, there is for people who earn over 59,800 and something, can't remember it off the top of my head, a smidgen under 60,000, I think it's safe to say. Anybody who earns more than that doesn't get any defined benefit for that bit above that. They get defined contribution, and the employer puts in 12%, and the person 8% goes in from the individual, and that is another little pot building up. Now, for some people that might suit, some people it might not, but 60,000, it's not affecting the majority of people. Now, the employers want to bring down that cap from the smidgen under 60,000 to 40,000, and that will encompass many senior lecturers, many people who are not as don't earn as much. And also 40,000 means you build up, especially if it's gone down to 85ths, it's going to be much slower, and you're building up much less pension. Even though you are building up a separate pot, a defined contribution pot, it's still not going to have as much going in. So that is a definite worsening. And I just want to say here, for you CU members, we will be putting and it may well be for non-members as well, I don't know. But we do have actuaries working on a model system which will be going public when it's ready, a week or so, and people will be able to punch in their details and find out how this proposal will affect them. So the other thing that the employers are talking about is to impose a CPI indexation cap of 2.5%. And what that means is that, and I'm telling you about your pension building up the 75th or 85th, builds up, and inflation goes on and inflation goes on. And at the moment, USS has a particularly generous inflation cap, which has never been hit because it's so generous that inflation never gets that high. Now, this cap now is going to be capped at 2.5%. And for most years, because we know the Bank of England targets 2% inflation, and most years inflation doesn't come anywhere near 2.5%. But some years it does, and older people like myself do remember back in the day when inflation hit massively high, you know, and but it doesn't, as I say, it doesn't happen very often. But if it did, then that would again lower the value of the pension. So UCU, as I say, are not very happy about this. UK feel it's necessary to get the numbers right to you know, to continue with the defined benefit, a credible defined benefit scheme, as they say. Well, what do UCU want? Well, UCU want to keep defined benefits for members. We believe it's better for members. We don't want to see members being given benefits that are, you know, really quite weak. And what we don't want to see is low paid members being hived off into a separate defined contribution scheme, which is another proposal of the employer, whereby they pay 4%, which initially looks attractive. But remember, this is a defined contribution scheme, so it's only 4% goes in, and the employer puts in 8%. And 12% doesn't, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, in the world, you know, compared to Tesco or something, it's probably quite good. But I mean, you know, it's certainly nothing like as good as your USS benefits, and really, it makes a two-tier workforce. But it, of course, if it's affordability is an issue, members could be tempted. So we want to address the affordability issue by looking at benefits, or mainly, you know, say tiered contributions like the TPS possibly, or some sort of reduced benefit, defined benefit scheme, whereby, you know, you're paying less and you might get a little bit less for, say, a short period of time. You know, people aren't particularly hung up or something like that. So we are looking at alternatives there in that space. What we want to see is employers to commit to supporting the scheme. And I think generally most employers are. What we want them to say is, no, we don't want everybody being pushed into defined contribution. We want to see a regulatory change, because we feel the government and regulator is pushing to pushing the schemes into these extremely prudent positions. And we'd like to see investment in return-seeking assets, basically a little bit riskier, just, you know, rather than tying everything to government bonds. And those return-seeking assets being ethical. Because a positive note, I think I want to say, you may well have seen it in the press today, but USS has committed to be zero carbon by 2050, possibly before. They're going to work towards before. And I have to say, and you know, I hate giving them credit, but credit where credit's due, they have been making big strides on the responsible investment front. You know, they've pulled out of tobacco, they've pulled out coal, they've pulled out of weapons and all, now they're denying the way of it into really bad weapons. But they're really, you know, doing much better. And of course, that's good value for money these days. You know, one time ethical investment was seen as a sort of bit of an oddity. You know, oh, well, you're going to lose your money. You're not going to get good returns on that. Why are you bothering? And I had that said to me. But now it's not only is it good for the planet and good for, you know, people, it actually is starting to give good returns. So we'd like to see more of that. And we would like to reluctantly, but we are exploring conditional indexation going forward, which is a method of keeping costs down in terms of, capping inflation increases and that kind of thing. We don't like it, but if there's a way of doing it whereby the costs of the scheme altogether come down, and that the scheme can go forward without costing members and employers increasing amount of monies year in, year out, then perhaps it's something worth exploring. But that's all that's happening at the moment. We've only had 2 meetings about it. We have another one next week. We're just getting experts in telling us actually what it means. So we won't do anything without consulting members, and nothing can change with the scheme without all members of the scheme being consulted. So I think that's important to know. So that when you look at the employer survey, or even if you've already filled it in and you, after hearing this and you look into it a bit more, you've got some other thoughts, I'm sure the employer want to hear them, whether they like them or not. But I think, its engagement's really important in this process. So I think just one more thing to say, that we might get the October increases that were from the 2018 valuation, which is moving member contributions to 11%. We want to avoid that. We want to get to some solution that avoids members paying 11%. At the moment, you're paying 9.6%. And I think that's enough. And also with the opt-out rates getting really high because of affordability issues mainly. So I think really I've given you an outline there. I hope I wasn't too technical. So if you've got any questions, I'll be more than happy. Thank you.